Good evening, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are joining us from. So happy to have you all here. My name is Scott Sinclair. I'm the Senior Manager of Programs here at Cancer and Careers, and I will be your host this evening. For those of you who are joining us from your phone, if you could let us know by sending an email to cancerandcareers@cew.org with your name and the phone number that you're dialing in from. That way we can confirm your attendance and make sure you receive all of the relevant follow-up information after the webinar. If you're joining on your computer, we've got that covered through Zoom, so you're good there. Now, for those of you who are new to Cancer and Careers, first of all, welcome. We're so glad to have you here. Just a little bit about us before we get started. We were founded in 2001 to support every person in every industry and every job to thrive in their work and life after a cancer diagnosis. Cancer and Careers also supports companies and develops internal systems of support for employees navigating illness at work. This slide has a list of all of our free programs and services that we offer for people with cancer, as well as their caregivers, healthcare providers, coworkers, really anyone who is touched by cancer or any long-term illness. We're happy to support here. We offer a comprehensive website and a library of publications, both of which are available in both English and Spanish. We have career coaching, resume review, financial and technology grants, access to experts for one-on-one support and educational events like the one you're about to see. And I will be back at the end of Julie's presentation today to go over a little bit about what we have coming up at Cancer and Careers. Now, some quick housekeeping before we get started. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please refer to our Zoom user guide, which is linked on this slide and is being shared in the chat as well. Or you can reach out to Zoom support using the contact information on this slide. Also, please note that today's presentation is copyrighted, therefore the use of AI assistance or transcribing or recording devices of any kind is not allowed. Those of you who are found using AI during the presentation will be removed from the event, and you'll be permitted to return once that is turned off. Real-time closed captioning is also available for today's event for those who need it, and a caption recording of the webinar will be archived on our website sometime next week following the session. If you have any other reasonable accommodation requests, please send an email to cancerandcareers@cew.org at least 24 hours before the next live session. Now, for those of you who are requesting continuing education credits, this slide lists all of the organizations who have accredited today's webinar, as well as the required steps for getting a certificate. This information is also available on our website. And please note that you're required to complete both the evaluation and pass the post-test to be eligible for CEs or PDCs. More information on how to access those will be shared throughout the webinar. And if you're unable to complete them today, that's totally fine. We're going to be sending an email to everybody who is here tomorrow, no later than 5 p.m. Eastern, with all of the links and, again, information on how to request those CEs. Also, for everyone here, please note that we love hearing from you both during the live webinar and after. So as you might know, Zoom has a lot of great features to use to interact with today's event. You can see a chat box in your features panel. Feel free to use that to communicate with the CAC staff or other attendees. However, it is important to note that the chat box is not private and it will show your first and last name. So that's just something to be mindful of when or if you decide to use it. Also, if you have any questions about today's content, you'll see a Q&A box also in that same features panel, either at the top or bottom of your screen. If you have any questions, we'll have some time at the end for Q&A, so drop those questions in the Q&A box. Just try not to put them in the chat box as we might miss them there. You want to put your questions in the Q&A box, and we know the importance of privacy, so there is an option to submit your questions anonymously in the Q&A box, not the chat box. Again, we'll do our best to answer everyone's questions, but if we don't have time for yours today, shoot us an email, cancerandcareers@cew.org, and we'll make sure we get you an answer as soon as possible. Now, additionally, your feedback on the program evaluations mean the world to us. All of us at CAC are dedicated to creating the best possible programs, and it's through hearing from you, your insights and observations, what worked, what didn't work. This is how we learn how to do the best that we can. So not only do your voices make a big difference in helping us and helping others enjoy the webinars that we are presenting, it's also really important for us to show our funders, again, always anonymously, the true impact of their support. And it allows us to continue offering these webinars free of charge. So we hope that you will take some time to complete that evaluation today. You can use the QR code that's on the screen. We'll bring it back at the end of the session as well in case you miss it. And we'll drop some links in the chat throughout the event as well if you want to get started on that today. Again, we'll drop an email tomorrow, no later than 5 p.m. with the link as well if you don't have time tonight. Now, thanks in part to support from P&G Beauty, Genentech, Blood Cancer United, and Johnson, Cancer and Careers is proud to offer our 12th year of the Balancing Work in Cancer webinar series, which was created to provide anyone whose life has been touched by cancer with concise, targeted information about the work-related issues that arise after a diagnosis. And additionally, we would like to recognize Cancer and Careers' year-round sponsors who support all of our core program and allow us to continue providing resources and services free of charge. Now, before I hand it over to Julie, I want to just briefly take a step back and look at the bigger picture of what people often experience when looking for work after a cancer diagnosis. There are many challenges and unknowns in any job search, which can bring up a range of emotions. And there can be days where you maybe get a bunch of phone calls for interviews where you feel really great. And that could be followed by, some days where there are nonstop cycle of challenges that you're facing. And sometimes that cycle is just going to repeat itself over and over again. And it's not uncommon to feel overwhelmed or maybe even burned out by the process. So it's important to look for opportunities to take action that can help you feel more in control of your own experience. And despite these inevitable ups and downs, uh, to push past any feelings of stuckness or frustration with the process. And one way to do that is by taking control and spending time to perfect your resume. So we've brought an incredible presenter to help with just that. But before I hand things over to her again, one more quick note about privacy. At CAC, we've often noticed over the years that people in the cancer community tend to hold themselves to a higher standard than others who are looking for work. So often survivors feel obligated to share more of their health history or personal information than they have to or they should, and more than someone without a cancer diagnosis would ever consider sharing. But the reality is, there's no obligation to disclose any details of your health or your health history, either at work or during a job search. And we also encourage people to think carefully before they share any information about their health or health history online. And while it's certainly the case, that less public than social media platforms like Facebook or LinkedIn, which we'll talk about more, AI is still an emerging technology, and the best practice is to think carefully about what information you share with any online platform. We'll touch on some of that during today's presentation, and then again, I'll be back to go through some specific questions at the end of Julie's presentation. So there are many components to looking for work, and a resume still remains an essential tool in the job search process. But more and more, a LinkedIn profile is just as crucial. So whether you're changing careers, returning to work after time off, or simply looking to highlight specific skills and experience, your resume and your LinkedIn profile tell your story. To take us through this topic, I'm thrilled to welcome back Julie Jansen. Julie is a speaker, trainer, coach, and author who's helped thousands of professionals find success and satisfaction at work, as well as find the work that is gratifying for them. Julie's one of our original coaches at CAC, and Julie does our resume review service, which we'll be plugging a few times during today's event, I'm sure. So we hope that you'll utilize that after the webinar as well. Again, I'll be back after to go over some questions. If you have them, drop them in the Q&A box. But for now, I'm going to pass it over to Julie. Julie, welcome.
Scott, you have such a soothing voice. I'm feeling soothed right now. But I'm going to be energized. Don't worry. And my taste behind the scenes, everyone. So I'm really happy to be here to talk about a topic that, frankly, most people don't enjoy. But it's, believe it or not, in 2026, you still have to have a resume. It's up for grabs whether some people think you need a LinkedIn profile or not. I happen to be in that camp of yes, you do need one. So we'll talk and dig into the essential elements of both writing your resume and writing your LinkedIn profile. Before we start, though, I just want to talk about a couple quick things. Managing, as Scott mentioned, managing the psychological aspects of a job search can be pretty difficult. Often writing your resume, it's the first thing people think of. It's one of the biggest obstacles to getting started. People feel, I've heard this feedback so many times when I write resumes for people, they feel so relieved because now they've got this onerous task out of the way. A resume is a living document and does need to be updated and does need to be tweaked, and we'll touch on that a little bit. But basically, your resume, you want to update it regularly. I can't tell you how many times I get a phone call or an email or a text from someone who says, "Oh my gosh, Julie, I have a resume emergency. I haven't updated my resume in 6 years or 8 years." And I had someone the other day, 20 years. It's a very difficult task for people, and they basically just try to avoid it. And I've honestly never heard anybody tell me that they enjoy writing or updating their resume. So hopefully I'll give you some tips today today or tonight that will make you feel a little more comfortable and a little more confident about doing it. Just want to give you a very, very quick history lesson. The origin of the resume actually began in feudal England as a letter of introduction from, at the time, a lord or a head of a guild. When it was men traveled to another part of the kingdom. It evolved eventually to becoming a curriculum vitae. You've heard that term, or a CV, which actually in French means course of one's life. And then finally, it became known as a resume. I would say, generally speaking, most Europeans will still call the document a CV, but they've definitely moved over to the Americanized version of a resume. So that's a little history. Moving on to the first slide here, how do you think about your resume? Your resume is a marketing document that speaks to a lot of different audiences. Yes, it does capture your history, of course, but more important, it needs to highlight your achievements, and so that a prospective employer will think that you can do the same things for them. That's the key. You absolutely do not need to list every single thing you've ever done in your career or every single job. Remember that the three audiences for your resume are ATS software first. ATS is not AI. There are companies that are incorporating AI into the hiring process, and, for example, AI interviews, but ATS software is basically database management. But it's very important and keywords focused based on algorithms. And then if you get past that scanning phase, it would be a recruiter, someone in-house at a company in HR, or an external recruiter at an agency. And then finally, the manager who actually understands what your job will be. And it's just really important to remember that it's not a regurgitation of everything. So on to the next slide. What do you need to do to write your resume? It's very difficult. Like when someone hires me to write their resume, I ask them to fill out a questionnaire, and it's a couple different parts. And I find it very useful in, writing someone's resume is not just, "Oh, send me your old resume and I'll rewrite it." I need a depth of information. And for you, some of the tools that you can use to help you think of achievements and help you remember your history would be job descriptions from your current or past jobs, if you can find those. Past performance reviews, if you work for a company that's pretty diligent about that process, you can get a lot of great data from that, especially to identify what your goals and achievements have been. Online job postings, you can use. When someone hires me, I always have them send me 2 or 3 or 4 links to job postings and I say to them, if you think you can do 75% of this job, send me the link. And that's where I pinpoint key phrases and keywords for ATS. And then the other thing is just, I mentioned resume emergencies. I would say just create a master resume on your computer and dump things in it. Dump things in it every month if you can, so that when when it's time for you to really rewrite your resume and you have an actual need for it, you've got it all there, and all you have to really do is wordsmith it. But unfortunately, 90% of people out there do not do this, and they do not collect all these documents. They don't document achievements, and then they need to scramble to find everything when they actually do need a resume. So some things that are important for writing an effective resume on the next slide would be you spend many, many hours writing and rewriting your resume, but you should not expect that anybody will read your resume with equal care. They'll definitely skim through it in probably 30 seconds. They might refer back to it. And there's certain sections of your resume that are more interesting for people to actually read. And remember, it's still being scanned first. But what I always say to people is write your resume for a person first, and then go back and add the keywords and phrases that are inherent in the job postings that you're looking at, or the types of work that you're looking at after the fact. Don't do that first. So, and to keep your reader's attention, nothing should be long. No long run-on sentences, no big, huge paragraphs. Although as a resume writer, I do find it easier when someone gives me too much information and I have to edit it down, versus the opposite, which is they give me these, four-word bullets, and then I have to add to it. And I know a lot about jobs, a lot about companies, a lot about industries. I'm an expert, but I don't know the nitty-gritty details. So more data is always better than less data. So another slide on writing an effective resume, some of the basics on the next slide is, do not write your resume in first person tense. Maite, if you could just go back one more slide backwards. Thank you. It's interesting. A resume is the only job search document that you should not use first person tense on, or personal pronouns. And it's kind of silly because if you think about it, LinkedIn, you have a choice of using first person tense or making it, more professional sounding. Cover letters are going to be I and me. Everything else is going to be that, except for a resume. But for whatever reason, that's just the rule of thumb for writing resumes. You always want to use very strong, results-driven, action-type verbs. So instead of words like helped and assisted and involved in or coordinated, use words like led or drove or executed and delivered. And don't get too hung up on, well, I had, 2 people on a committee who helped me with this. It's okay that you all led the project. So it's okay to say led. It doesn't mean that you singularly did it yourself. And people kind of get very focused on it has to be the absolute truth. 2 pages for the most part for most people. But if you're entry level 1, although over the years, I've seen a trend of people who are entry level who have had so many internships or externships or co-op programs, and so it's hard for them to keep their resumes on one page. And there's no crime to having a 1.5 page resume if you're entry level. And then across the board, I'll see a 3 page resume in academia, in medicine and science, and those kinds of jobs where there's a lot of posters and publications and presentations and things like that. I often will do an addendum for people in those fields so that they don't always have to send all of that information to overwhelm whomever they're sending it to. And that's a nice document to have that you can send as an extra or send with your resume. And then a resume needs to be relevant, not just focused on history. It's acceptable, as I said earlier, to omit early career jobs. The only time someone won't want to do that is if, like, their first job out of college or their second job, they were like, this was the best job I ever had. I accomplished the most. And so we'll include that, of course. And it's not even about an age thing. I mean, I get that question so often about ageism. Yes, there is ageism. Yes, ageism occurs mostly with larger corporations. But you're not putting jobs on your resume because you're over 50. You're doing it, you're omitting those because of the lack of relevance in most cases. And then if you have an odd or unusual job title, and that does exist in specific industries, what I like to do is put either in parentheses equivalent to and use the more universal job title, or just put the universal job title in parentheses. So moving on to writing an effective resume on the next slide. A profile or summary is still a must on a resume. You don't have to have a profile or summary if you're entry level necessarily. I do suggest using a bulleted keyword section, which I'll talk about in a few moments, but with an entry level resume. But everybody else should have like a 3 sentence, at most 4 sentence summary or profile that kind of describes everything about you, so that whoever's looking at it or reading it can tell exactly what your level of experience is, what your core skills or expertise are, what kind of experience you have industry-wide, or industry-wise rather, and those kinds of things. And then I always like adding like a little sentence at the end that sort of is a descriptor of you as professionals, those qualities and characteristics that make you stand out. And then, of course, the strategic keywords that I talk about ad nauseum for ATS that need to be picked up. And those primarily are not going to be the softer skills unless you're in a role like, say, you're a social worker. Then, some of those softer skills are going to be much more important, like counseling, and or facilitating meetings or things like that, or workshops. But we'll talk about ATS a little bit later, in greater detail. So, and then again, lead with impact, not tasks. So that means you want, if possible, 75 to 80% of your content on your resume is focused on achievements. And achievements, we'll get into the formulas for writing achievements. They're one of the hardest things for people to write. They either think that whatever they've done in their work isn't of great consequence, or they didn't solve world hunger, so what would they write down? But there's definitely a formula and a way to do it. And it doesn't have to be, the most monumental achievement that you've ever accomplished. And accomplishments and achievements, I use those sort of simultaneously. They really mean the same thing. And you do, if you can, want to quantify your results by using metrics, whether it's percentages or dollars or euros or scale or scope, to demonstrate value. So a person who reduced turnover, if I can talk, by 25% in 6 months is more impressive than someone who reduced turnover without the percentage. And people will often say, well, I don't know exactly how much money I saved the company or what the percentage was. It's okay to guesstimate a little bit as long as it's not hyperbole, you know. So, and then moving on to the next slide, avoid using cliches like an effective communicator or detail oriented. Try to be a little bit more creative without being too out of the box about describing your, for example, team building skills or your communication skills and how the specific type of communicator you are was effective for you in your jobs. A headline is just like on LinkedIn is always a great idea, very clear, keyword rich. It's all about the keywords in the headline. And of course, always aligned to your target role. So what I'll say to people is your headline should be essentially the title of the job that you're applying for on your resume. And that's an easy switch out. You can change it 1, 2, 3. Lead with your experience as far as format. And then education and certifications is always afterward, unless you're entry level or early career. Then you want to put your education first. If you've graduated in the last couple of years, then yes, and that would go first. And also if you're working on an advanced degree, you might want to lead with your education there as well. Professional affiliations, memberships, very important to add those. And for those of you who perhaps have been out of the workplace because you've been going through treatment, you've lost your job, you're taking a break, volunteer and community work can hold a very important place on your resume because and it's not just listing the organization and the fact that you were, a volunteer that helped with I'm trying to think of a marathon or something, then be more specific about how you demonstrated specific skills, how you were committed, your leadership abilities, if that's relevant. And so never avoid putting volunteer service on. And it still isn't the best idea to mix volunteer experience with work experience. I'm kind of a bit of a stickler about separating whether you got paid or you didn't get paid. But I have seen some resumes where people haven't had work experience in a pretty long time, where they put their volunteers experience front and center, and then put their work experience if it was further back. So there are different ways to handle your gaps and handle those kinds of situations. Moving on to more tips for writing an effective resume. Definitely you want some white space and decent sized margins. And these are my favorite fonts. You all got the slides. So these are my favorites that I tend to use just because they're ATS friendly more than anything. And they're also cleaner and easier to read with the human eye. Putting addresses on your resume, that's an outdated practice now. Nobody does it. That actually started before the pandemic. It's just helps with flexibility. It helps with remote work, with hybrid work, not being wed to a geographic area is always a good idea. And I'm shocked at how many people still list their references on their resume or say references are available. And I have a pretty diplomatic way of when I'm giving feedback for the resume review service that Scott mentioned I do, where I say, if someone wants your resumes, your references, you certainly are going to offer them. It's not like you're going to hold them back. And you don't want to be putting people's names and contact information on your resume because who knows where that will end up. So that's the reason for omitting those. So now on the next slide, we're going to just talk about I mentioned action verbs, results-oriented types of verbs. And this is a whole list of verbs that you can use when writing accomplishments. It's really easy to fall into the rut of using manage, led, a sold, built. And you kind of want to, a thesaurus is great for that. You kind of want to switch them out and try to think of different verbs that you can use. But the reason that action verbs are used on resumes and usually start every single accomplishment is they just make your experience clearer, stronger, more persuasive, and they immediately show what you did, the impact you had, rather than just listing responsibilities. So on the next slide, we're going to dig into how to write accomplishments. As I mentioned, it's something that people really struggle with. And so my cat just sneezed and I couldn't imagine what that noise was. That's funny. So when you're writing accomplishments, what you want to do is maybe think of a formula. And the simplest one is PAR. PAR stands for problem, action, and result. Or it could be issue, action, result, challenge, action, result, whatever it is. There's something that wasn't working or could be working better. And you want to kind of figure out what that is. So this slide, and when we get to the next one, this slide is just gives you some questions that you can ask yourself to sort of trigger some responses. So did you accomplish something with fewer resources? How did you do it? And what was the results? Did you get special recognition or did you get promoted for something you achieved? Did you improve efficiency? Did you solve problems? Did you do something that the company had never done before for the first time? Did you create or build or design something? And so asking yourself these questions helps to prompt some responses, hopefully, about your jobs. And then on the next slide, there's other questions, about managing or training employees, which is always a key part of working, collaborating with others, and working on teams, and saving money and increasing sales. I mean, most people aren't in sales, but sales tends to be one of the easier industries or functional areas where you can think of accomplishments, but being given additional responsibilities and identifying a problem that nobody else saw. So remember when you're updating your resume to refer back to these two slides and look at these questions. So now I'm going to kind of move on to what an actual accomplishment is. So if we could go to the next slide. So there's some components to, and this is an actual real example that I've used for a while on how to think of an accomplishment. It happens to be an administrative support professional. There still are administrative support professionals out there. I coach at companies and they still have administrative assistants and executive assistants. It kind of astounds me, but it's usually the bigger companies. But that said, let's go through this. So this is a person who was supporting level people. He or she was asked to manage the expense approval process. There were 15 employees in 2 departments. And then this person saw that there were forms that had to be filled out, not just 1, but 3. And so one of them was on a system, a newer system. 2 of the others were on legacy systems. And it was just so inconvenient for these employees, these 15 employees, to fill out these forms and submit them, even though they were online, but it was still a pain in the neck for them to do it. So they just wouldn't do it. And they'd prolong the process of, submitting their expenses and obviously getting paid. And they had a policy of wanting these expenses to be submitted no later than 30 days after the travel and entertainment occurred. So this administrative person spent a good portion of her time chasing these 15 employees. And as you well know, some employees are buttoned up about stuff like this and some will avoid it at all costs. So that was the problem. So moving on to the next slide, the second thing was, what did this person do about it? And that's where you want to be as specific as possible. So what they did is they consolidated all 3 forms by just taking the information and putting it on one form with all the necessary information. Then they presented it to the 2 managers that they support and obviously suggested that it should stay on the newer system because the legacy systems were going to be shut down. The barrier, and the reason the obstacle or barrier kicks in here is like, that's a problem like that you have to overcome. And in this case, this one director wasn't interested at all in changing the process, didn't care, didn't see the benefit. But the other manager said, that's a pretty good idea. And so they asked the manager who believed in it to talk to the other manager and influence them, which she was able to do. So then moving on to the next slide, the results, which hopefully could be quantified. this is the actual like sort of result, and you'll see shortly how we wrote out the accomplishment. So after 8 months of the new form being implemented, 100%, I don't know why it says 13 here because I thought there were 15 employees, but maybe I changed that. 100% of the employees were submitting their expenses on time because it was easy peasy for them. And it gave this person the time to focus on other responsibilities that honestly were much more significant. Everybody appreciated the new process and there were no more nagging emails from finance. So on the next slide, this is the actual bullet that was developed for the resume. And I don't need to read it to you, but you can see it's succinct. It identifies numbers. It talks about the single online system, improving productivity, and most importantly, reducing payment cycle from 90 plus to 30 days. So that's a real-time example of how you can write an accomplishment. And it really does work. And as you can see, this is not earth shattering, but it saved this person probably 20% of their time, simplified things, made everybody happy. So it's a pretty key accomplishment for this individual. So moving on to the next slide. Let's get into ATS, which stands for Applicant Tracking Systems. ATS is the foundation of the hiring process in most medium and large organizations. There are still very small organizations that don't use it, but for the most part, most do. And it's used by recruiters and by employers to collect, to scan, to sort, and rank job applications that they receive. Companies knock out applicants first. They don't identify the people that are the closest fit first. They knock out the people that, based on their algorithms, whatever percentage that is, then it's the filtering bots algorithms, they're knocked out. And algorithms differ from company to company, so I can't really sit here and tell you what they are exactly. On average, a corporate job posting gets between 100 and 250 applications. It does not mean 100 to 250 qualified people, but they do get a lot of applications. And if ATS is doing its job, it's knocking out the people that are not qualified. And then they screen in somewhere between 10 and 20 applicants. Okay, so moving on to the next slide, more about ATS. While you're saving your resume, it's not up here, but saving your resume as a PDF is the best way to preserve the format. But a PDF is not compatible with all ATS software. So I'm just going to tell you that you might want to play it safe and go with a .docx file, .docx versus PDF or Word or .doc. So those are the ones that you want to kind of focus on, saving your resume with those. Not all ATS are able to properly, I think what I have is I have my slides mixed up, so I'll just talk through this slide, but sorry about that. But basically, I've talked about keywords. If you don't know whether or not you have the right keywords on your resume, there are word cloud tools that are listed here on this slide. Word clouds, word it out, word art, there's a ton of them. And even AI can help you with that now, but just to spot the high frequency terms, so you can cut and paste a job posting and then cut and paste your resume. And then I noticed I just got really dark, so forgive me. Let me see if I can fix that. Okay. And then see how many keywords you actually have on your resume that align with whatever is on the job posting. And a great way to do that is just to analyze job descriptions, to identify those reoccurring requirements. Okay, so on to the next slide, which is I like to always put a core competencies or areas of expertise or skills section right underneath your summary. So it'd be your contact info, your headline, your summary, and then a keyword section. And those are going to be typically 9 keywords. that are going to be, again, mimicking the ones that are in the job descriptions. And that's always a good idea. And those are easy to switch in and out as well. Okay, so next slide. Always spell out words first. Like this example is search engine optimization, and then put in parentheses whatever the abbreviation is, in this case, SEO. ATS gets confused by a lot of things, a lot of things. So those fancy, formats that I see so often when I'm reviewing resumes for CAC, they've got to go. If you want one to, have a resume with those nice, pretty formats with the colors and the swirly things, you can have that to send to people, but you should not use those to apply online, because ATS can get confused by all these things here, columns and tables and borders and graphs and color and strange bullets. And images. So you can get free resume reviews and scans from some of these that are listed here, Job Scan and Top Resume. Just be wary that they may try to sell you and want you to, buy a resume overhaul or a resume rewrite. And if you don't want to do that, just be careful of that. Okay. And now on the next slide, we're going to talk about cover letters just very briefly. Cover letters are still important. And people with a passion hate cover letters, hate writing them. I keep them simple. I keep them brief, 3 short paragraphs. Open up, and it could be a cover email as well. So then you have to kind of agonize over whatever your subject line is for the email. But just try to open it up with something interesting. You're opening it up initially with, I'm applying for this job at your organization. And what I'm so excited about in applying for this is A, B, C, D. That's where you do your homework. You try to be a little creative, say something interesting, and then use bullets instead of long paragraphs. Again, keep it brief, try to proof it. I know it's hard to follow up with a person. Odds are that you're probably not going to get through to a person, but you want to try. And if nothing else, apply online and then go on LinkedIn and try to find someone who can maybe talk to the hiring person or talk to the recruiter and mention that you have applied, and then see if they can pave the way for you within the organization. So that's just my 2 cents about cover letters, but please write them. They're not, once you have a template, you want to be careful to really customize it, but you don't have to rewrite a cover letter for every single job. Okay, so now we're going to jump into LinkedIn. And I know we want to have some time for Q&A, but I am still surprised when someone doesn't have a LinkedIn profile. I coached 2 people this week that said one was very senior, a CFO, and she said, I don't like LinkedIn. I do not intend to have a profile. I tried to plead and persuade and influence, and she wouldn't have it. So that's her choice. But it's a wonderful tool. It isn't Facebook. It isn't Insta. It isn't TikTok. It's just simply a very professional tool for you to use to connect with people and for people to connect with you and find you. And it's a wonderful content platform. So quite obviously, it's huge. 1 billion people globally. That doesn't mean they're all active. I think it's it's probably 1.15 billion at this point. About 200 countries. US has the most users. More than 90% of recruiters use LinkedIn as their primary tool to source and vet candidates. And they're also using it to identify red flags, assess cultural fit, verify information, and do early stage screening. So it has a wide purpose. More about LinkedIn on the next slide. There's about 140 job applications submitted every second on LinkedIn. And these are LinkedIn statistics, by the way. LinkedIn is, as I mentioned, not only a job marketplace, but a great content platform to increase professional visibility. It's multi-purpose. It's for building networks, showcasing expertise, being discovered beyond traditional job titles, especially if you're a non-linear type of candidate. where you've worked in lots of different industries or had some gaps, and it helps you showcase not just job titles, but your skills, your achievements, your engagement. So it's very powerful. So how do you find jobs using LinkedIn on the next slide? You optimize your entire profile with keywords. There are so many sections that you can populate keywords in. There's the very obvious skills section. There's the headline. There's the let recruiters know you're open to opportunities. It's a very brief questionnaire that asks you if you want to work remotely, hybrid, on site, your geography. You're able to put in 5 job titles, and you want to be careful that you put in job titles that are the ones that pop down when you start typing in a job, like career coach. And if I don't see career coach, I'm not going to put career coach in there. I'm going to use something that is already there, even if it isn't exactly what I do, because otherwise it won't be as effective. And if you want to, you certainly can use the open to work photo frame. I am not professionally or personally a huge fan of that, but I'm not saying not to do it. It's just, I feel like it just gives you a certain kind of visibility that maybe you don't want. But that's just me. There's a lot of different opinions about that. So, and by the way, the let recruiters know you're open. You can also set up on LinkedIn to have emailed jobs to you. So even though I've been in my own business for over 20 years, I still get jobs emailed to me every day for career coaches, executive coaches, vocational experts. I love it, resume writers, because I can see what's out there. And it's not that I probably plan on applying for anything. I mean, there might be some freelance situations I've applied for, but it's just really cool to kind of see what's going on in your world. So I definitely recommend that too. Okay, so now we'll go into some of the sections on LinkedIn. They're pretty understandable. This is my basic information here, who I am. I actually just rewrote. This is slightly. I worked on this deck probably a week ago, and I just updated my LinkedIn profile, and I didn't think to use new screenshots, but it's pretty similar to what I have. In this case, I updated my headline so it wasn't just a list of titles, but I pretty much left it the same. But you can see you can put your metro area, your I didn't want to use Julie Jansen LLC for my URL, but you'd be shocked at how many Julie Jansens there are. A lot. And my real name is Julia, but unfortunately, Julie is my professional name for my books and everything. So there I am. But you can customize your URL, and most people forget or do not know that they can do that. And most names are available. You'd be shocked. So I would recommend that you do that. But your headline is one of the most essential elements of your LinkedIn profile and one of the most highest weighted fields in LinkedIn search. Most people will default to their job title, which is fine if you have a universally recognized title, but you do have room in your headline for 220 characters. So customizing your headline can be a good idea, and use future facing skills, not just your legacy skills. And yes, a current photo is necessary. You don't have to have a professional photo, and colors preferred, but black and white is fine too. Mine looks black and white, but it's actually color, just because I'm wearing an off-white blouse. And then moving on to the about section. The about section, oh, this is a slide, sorry, about the types of information that you can add to LinkedIn. Now, Maite, if you could go forward again. And then go forward again from one more slide. Sorry. Okay. So, well, and then keep going. Your headline and your photo I've covered. Okay, here I am. But so the about section is, it's not a biography. It's your personal marketing story. You have 2,600 characters to position your value, your expertise, and your impact. So, maybe you just ask yourself the questions: what do you do? Who do you help? And how do you deliver results? And then incorporating keywords, of course, in this section as well. And then what I call proof points, which are things like results, industry, scope, and credibility. And then draft it in Word first, spell check it, and then paste it into LinkedIn and always hit save. Now, on the next slide, you'll see a before about section. And I'm not going to read this to you, but this is like kind of a little cliched sounding about a communications professional, team player, strong communication skills. And now we'll go to the after about section on the next slide. And then this one's a little longer, but this person you can see helping global brands, partnering with CEOs. Work has spanned all sorts of interesting areas of expertise, known for bringing clarity and chaos. And then let's connect if you're looking for a communications leader who can protect your brand and propel it forward. So vastly improved from the before that you saw. So put a lot of attention and effort into your about section and your headline of everything on LinkedIn. Okay, moving on to the next section, which is skills. You have room for 100 skills. Put up to 100 skills in that section. These function as keywords that drive recruiter searches. Use LinkedIn suggested skills to increase your chances of appearing in searches, and prioritize the skills that are aligned with your target roles and industries. And well, if you get endorsements really don't matter. The only thing they end up doing is moving the skills higher. So if a lot of people endorse me about, excuse me, career coaching, it'll move it way up. But if I don't want career coaching to be in my top three, which is the top three are the ones that are visible, I can reorder it. There's a way to do that, to push it down. So you can reorder all your skills in any way you want, even if LinkedIn has prioritized moving skills up because you've gotten more endorsements. So remember that you want to be strategic about how you reorder your skills. Okay, so next let's talk about recommendations. Recommendations are great. They're actually one of the few things that people like to read. They don't read them in their entirety. I think I have a ton of recommendations, but I don't and I guess the key to the recommendations are make sure they're current. And so I always say to people, if you don't have any recommendations, at least get three, if not five. Try to keep them current every year. Ask two or three people for new recommendations. They enhance your credibility of you as a professional, and you can give the person talking points so that they get help with writing it. You can send someone a request on LinkedIn to write you a recommendation. And so recommendations are very important. The next thing is talking about reviewing your statistics on LinkedIn. So you can see here I have 4,447 followers. There were 85 post impressions. I post relatively regularly. This was on March 22nd. That came from a screenshot from that. And it tells you how many viewers you have and how many appearances your profile makes. So it's kind of fun to review it and see, how visible you are, since visibility is a big part of LinkedIn. And then finally, my last slide is about how to stay active on LinkedIn. People ask me this all the time. I don't know what to do when I'm on LinkedIn. Keep your profile fresh, update things, update your skills, your results, your keywords. Maite and Scott and I were having a conversation about that. They're both going to, well, Scott just spent some time updating his, and Maite is going to as well. So it's just a good idea to do that on a regular basis. It certainly doesn't have to be every month. Be selective and strategic with connections. You don't want to end up having all these connections and not knowing who anybody is, and then having someone reach out to you and say, hey, can you connect me to this person? And you have no idea who the person is. So that defeats the purpose, So, but also grow beyond who you know and build new and relevant relationships. Respond quickly to requests when people send them to you. And I like the sort of rule of thumb of spending 15 to 20 minutes a day. I know that sounds like a lot, and maybe not all of you are. Maybe for you, it's just going to be once a week, but just engaging, searching, and networking. And of course, reading content. So that's what I have about resumes and LinkedIn. We'll go back to Scott, who will talk to us a little bit more.
Thank you, Julie. As always, this is so informative. Oh, Maite, if you want to put the slides back up, we got a few more things to go through. Um, Thank you so much. So, here are some job search resources for anyone who wants some more information. We have our resume review service that we talked about earlier. Julie will take your resume and give you feedback on it. It's free for anybody who's received a cancer diagnosis. So, please take advantage of that. It's a really great service that is one of my favorite things that we do here. We also have career coaching. We have publications you can download as well for different job search resources. This is my contact info. If you have any questions after the fact, feel free to reach out to me. Also, we'd love to follow on social media. All of our tags, or all of our handles, I should say, are here, as well as our website and our newsletter sign up. And then we have some upcoming webinars. We are being joined by Julie again next month. The topic's going to be networking, so we hope that you'll come back and join us for that as well. And then we have a two-part Communicating Effectively series over the summer in July and August that I'm going to be running. So I hope that I'll see a lot of you there as well. And then we also have our Spanish language webinars. If any of you speak Spanish, you have any clients, patients, anyone in your life that speaks Spanish, we'd love to have them there as well. Our next one is going to be June 3rd, which is on job search. And then we have balancing work and mental health and balancing work and caregiving also coming up this year. Again, those are conducted in Spanish. So any Spanish speakers in your life, or if you speak Spanish, we'd love to have you there as well. And then we also have our national conference coming up on June 26th. That is going to be an all-day event with different speakers and presentations. It's going to be a really great day. We hope you'll join us for that as well. And then we have our West Coast conference coming up later in the year in October. Those are happening both on Zoom. You can be anywhere in the country. They're really tied to the time zone that they're happening in more than anything else. So we'd love to see you at those as well. And then just again, anyone requesting CEs, these are the steps for getting your certificate. Again, this will all be emailed to you later in the day tomorrow as well. And then I'll leave this up here if to you can scan the QR code for our evaluation. Also, Maite, if you can just drop that link in the chat, that'd be great. So, Julie, I have some questions here for us. Again, if you have questions, drop them in the Q&A box. We're going to try to get through as many as we can. The first one here, Julie, could you go over the proper structure of a resume, the contact info, summary, core competencies,
Sure.
education, etc.?
Absolutely. So contact information, no full address, add your LinkedIn URL if you're on LinkedIn, headline, which is the keywords for that reflect the job title that you're applying for, a summary, 3 or 4 sentences, bulleted keyword section, um, experience, work experience. It would be your company name, location, dates, years worked, title, little description about the company if you want to add that, and bulleted achievements, education, and then certifications, professional associations, and then volunteer service.
Yeah, a few people too are asking about templates. I think you can, if you just Google resume template or something, you're going to find hundreds of
But
different.
Google ATS friendly resume templates
There
for
you go.
sure. Yeah.
The next question I have here, how can I ask for a recommendation and not make my current employer think that I'm looking for a job?
Oh, on LinkedIn. Yeah. Your current employer, you can you turn on your privacy settings on LinkedIn if you want. But trust me when I tell you your current employer is not looking at your profile every day trying to see what's different and what's changed and what's been updated. Not at all. It just doesn't happen. So
Yeah.
it's a concern that I'm not dismissing it, but it's not necessary to worry about that.
I think you can also ask for recommendations from people who aren't necessarily your direct supervisor
Yeah, you're
or
not gonna, yeah,
boss.
I didn't, you're not definitely not gonna ask I mean, you can do that depending on your relationship, I guess, right? I don't see
Exactly.
why not. Yeah,
But
hadn't
there's
thought about that.
you can think outside of the box there too. It can be coworkers, it can be someone that you worked on a special project with who is maybe a
Yeah,
consultant outside of the company.
clients.
Like there's tons of people who can write recommendations who aren't like directly supervising you if that's something you're worried about too.
Yeah,
Again, like Julie said, I think depending on your relationship, depending on the type of organization, depending on your tenure. Like there's a lot of things that go into these that can be personal and different for everybody, but I would say don't feel locked into just like your
Right. And
immediate
it's a nice ego
supervisor.
boost to read what people write about you, you know? It's kind of
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. I know I try to write them like when someone leaves or, is moving on, I'll try to write a paragraph or something before they move on, even if I
Yeah.
have no power over them in the office, but I still work day to day with them and can talk about what it's like to who they are as a person, as a worker, as a
Yeah.
collaborator, et cetera, et cetera. So that's definitely something I think not to be too tied down on.
Yeah.
The next question here, Julie. There are many challenging physical changes following cancer treatment, including hair loss. How would you address this for individuals who are sensitive to such a recent change with regard to a headshot or profile photo?
So, I mean, you might be better to answer this, Scott, but I think you can, I mean, if you wear a wig, I don't know, or a headscarf, I don't know, or you can use, some people just use older photos if they have hair loss.
Yeah,
That those are some of the ways that people handle it. It does raise a red flag if you don't have any kind of photo, unfortunately. So just deciding what you're comfortable with. And Scott, I'm sure you have some words of wisdom for this too.
yeah, a lot of things that we talk about here at Cancer Careers is do whatever you feel comfortable with is what a lot of things come down to. So I think it depends on whether you're disclosing or not, whether you feel comfortable with people knowing about your diagnosis or not, whether there's those kinds of personal questions you can ask yourself. And if you want to talk one-on-one, I'm more than happy to set up a call and we can go into more about disclosure and the questions you can ask yourself about making your own decisions. Like Julie said, I think it's totally fine to use a photo from before your treatment started. I think if you are going in there and you are fully open and don't care if somebody knows your diagnosis and you want to put a photo of you with a headscarf or you with a wig, I think that's also perfectly acceptable as long as you've thought through maybe the things that come with that and challenges that disclosing in a job search specific may entail as well. But really, whatever you're comfortable with, we were just talking beforehand too. It doesn't necessarily need to be a professional headshot. It can be
No.
a nice photo of you on the beach that your kid took of you, or a picture of you with your sibling that they're just cropped out of, and you can't even really tell in there. So it doesn't necessarily need to be like a professional headshot that is taken in the last 6 months. You want it to be somewhat current and you want to be able to walk into an interview and have them not be surprised by, a 30-year-old photo of you. But I think something from last year is perfectly fine to use as well. Okay, I think this is going to be the last question we have here. Again, if we didn't get to your question, we're so sorry. But cancerandcareers@cew.org is our email that you can reach out to with any questions about anything relating to work and cancer, and we'll help you get an answer to it as soon as we can. The last question I have here, Julie, is can an older person qualify as entry level, or is that off-putting to a recruiter or a reviewer?
I mean, if you're talking about a career change, then you might be more entry level. But if you're talking about the fact that you're trying to find a job that just doesn't have the same level of responsibility, then you do want to communicate that. But you're probably in either case not going to use the language entry level. I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, and I feel like this is something where a cover letter might be able to explain why I went from this to that, or why I had all of this
Yeah.
responsibility. Now I want to be the receptionist answering the phone or whatever the job is. It could be a like, I thought of retiring, but I still wanted something to do and I wanted something more low pressure or something like that. Or maybe not, maybe that's a little condescending of the job, but
Even in your Even in your summary, you can put a sentence like pivoting to blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I do that a lot when I write resumes for people. But yes, Scott's right. That's a conversation. Are you going to get knocked out because you look too senior? There are cases where that happens, so you want to make sure you're using the right keywords that reflect the specific job you're applying for, just like any
Yeah.
other job. But yeah,
Yeah, and it could be about tailoring your resume to be more about the tasks in this quote unquote entry level job. So it wouldn't be necessarily brought in $7 million in sales, but it could be, answered phones, continued relationships with clients or, matching your skills on your resume to the skills that are being looked for in the job description itself too.
entry level is means it's not the first job really is what entry level is typically first or second job. So it's kind of misused those words in a
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Julie, thank you so much for being here. I'm glad we get to do this again in just a few weeks. We hope that you guys will all come for networking as well next month. But Julie, thanks again, and we hope to see you soon.
Thanks, Scott. Bye, Mate.
Take care.